The red coat was the first thing he saw, a small splash of color against the white and gray of the frozen Montana afternoon. The kind of red that shouldn't exist in winter. The kind that makes you look twice. Boone Kane had been riding for 3 hours. His leather jacket hung open despite the cold. His hands gripped the handlebars with the easy confidence of a man who had spent 30 years on motorcycles. The road stretched ahead of him, empty, silent, the way he preferred it. Route 93 cut through Flathead Valley like a scar, on both sides. Frozen fields reached toward distant mountains. The sky hung low, heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. The kind of afternoon that felt like evening, even though the clock said 2. He was thinking about his mother, the way he always did on this date, January 12th, 7 years since the heart attack that took her. 7 years since he'd stood in the cemetery on the hill outside Kalispell and watched them lower her casket into ground, so frozen they'd needed a jackhammer to break through. She'd lasted longer than his father. That much was true, but not by much, not in the ways that mattered. The red coat appeared around a curve. At first, just a flash, a trick of light maybe, or a mailbox someone had painted bright. But then the curve straightened and Boone saw her, a little girl, standing at the edge of the road, alone. She couldn't have been older than 6, small, so impossibly small against the vastness of the empty road. The frozen fields, the weight of the Montana winter pressing down on everything. Her red coat hung open. A green backpack sat on her shoulders, too big for her frame. Her boots were planted in the snow, but her body was still, not moving, not waving, not crying, just standing there, looking around slowly, methodically, like she was trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Boone's hands moved before his mind caught up, squeezing the brakes, downshifting. The motorcycle's growl dropped to a rumble, then silence as he pulled to the shoulder. He killed the engine, sat there, one boot on the ground, one still on the peg, his eyes fixed on the little girl 30 yards ahead. She hadn't looked at him yet, hadn't registered the motorcycle. She was still scanning the road, the trees, the empty space all around her, searching for something that wasn't there. Boone's chest tightened, a sensation he recognized, had lived with for 30 years, the weight that never quite left. The stone that sat where his heart used to be. He swung his leg over the bike. His boots crunched in the snow as he walked toward her. Slow, deliberate, every step measured. He'd learned through hard experience that men his size, men with his appearance, could terrify children without meaning to. 6'3", 240 pounds, gray streaking through his dark beard like smoke through timber, tattoos crawling up both arms, a leather vest with patches that told stories most people didn't want to read. The Lone Riders MC, Montana chapter, established 1987. He stopped 10 feet from her, didn't want to crowd her, didn't want to be the thing that made her run. She turned then. Her eyes found to his face. They were green, bright against her pale skin. There was something in those eyes, something that made his throat tight. No fear, no panic, just confusion, and underneath that, a quiet kind of hope. "Hey there." His voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat, tried again. "You okay?" She studied him, the way children study things, with a directness adults forget how to use, taking in his size, his beard, the leather, the patches, making calculations he couldn't follow. "Are you lost?" he asked. She blinked. Her small hands gripped the straps of her backpack. Then she spoke, her voice so soft he had to lean forward to hear it. "I was with someone, but she didn't come back." The words hung in the cold air between them. Boone felt something shift in his chest, the stone there cracking. Just a little, just enough to hurt. He looked around, scanned the road in both directions. Nothing. No car parked on the shoulder. No adult figure walking back. No house in sight, just the empty stretch of asphalt, the frozen fields, the silence. "How long have you been waiting?" he asked. She shrugged, the gesture small and uncertain. "I don't know. A long time." Boone crouched down, bringing himself to her level. The snow soaked into the knee of his jeans. The cold bit through the denim. He didn't notice. His eyes stayed on her face. "What's your name?" "Sophie." Sophie, he repeated it, making sure she heard him say it right. That's a good name. My name is Boone. She nodded, still watching him, still deciding. Sophie, can you tell me where you live or where your mommy is? Sophie's brow furrowed. She looked down at her boots, then back up at him. I was at Mrs. Brennan's house. She was crying, so I left. I was trying to walk to my grandma's house, but the snow made everything look different. She paused, her lower lip trembling. I don't know where I am now. Boone's jaw clenched. His mind was already working, processing. A child this young, alone in temperatures that were dropping by the minute. This wasn't lost. This was crisis. Every second she stood out here, the danger increased. Hypothermia could set in faster than most people realized, especially in a child this small. But he also understood something else, the danger of this situation for both of them, for her and for him. He was a large man, a biker, alone on an empty road with a little girl he'd never met. If someone drove past right now, saw them together, the wrong conclusions could be drawn instantly, without question, without mercy. He'd seen it happen. Good men destroyed by suspicion, reputations shattered in seconds. The world didn't always reward people for doing the right thing. But he looked at Sophie's face, at the way she was trying so hard to be brave, at the way her small body shivered inside her red coat, at the way her eyes searched his, looking for someone she could trust. He couldn't walk away. Wouldn't. Okay, Sophie, I'm going to help you find your grandma, but first, we need to get you warm. There's a gas station a few miles back. We can call your family from there. Would that be okay? Sophie nodded, once, twice, trust forming in the space between them. Boone stood slowly, pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen lit up. He checked the signal bar. Nothing, not a single bar. He held it higher, moved it left, right. Still nothing. He looked down the road, both directions, empty. The gray sky stretched over the frozen fields. The silence pressed in from every side. The temperature was dropping. He could feel it, the way the cold was starting to cut through his jacket, the way the air felt sharper, thinner, if he didn't get her somewhere warm soon. Things could go very bad, very quickly. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. He looked back at Sophie. She was still watching him, waiting, her small face pale against the white snow. Sophie, I'm going to take you to that gas station on my motorcycle. It's not far, just a few minutes, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She looked at the motorcycle, then back at him. Is it scary? It can be a little loud, but I'll go slow, and I promise I won't take you anywhere scary. I just want to get you warm. Okay. Sophie thought about this, her green eyes serious. Then she nodded. Okay. Boone walked to the motorcycle, swung his leg over the seat, turned and reached down for her. His large hands wrapped around her small frame. He lifted her gently, set her on the seat in front of him. Her legs dangled, too short to reach anything. He unzipped his leather jacket, pulled it off his shoulders. The cold hit him immediately, cutting through his flannel shirt like a knife. But he didn't hesitate. He wrapped the jacket around Sophie, tucking it around her body until she was almost lost inside the heavy leather. The jacket smelled like motor oil and old roads and 30 years of riding. But it was warm, and that was all that mattered. Hold on to the handlebars, he told her. Keep your hands inside the jacket as much as you can. Sophie gripped the bars with her small fingers. Boone reached around her to take control, his arms forming a protective cage, a barrier between her and the cold, between her and everything that could hurt her. He started the engine. The motorcycle rumbled to life beneath them. Sophie flinched at the sound, but didn't cry, didn't pull away. Here we go, Boone said quietly, nice and slow. He pulled onto the road. The wind was bitter against his exposed arms, the cold sinking into his bones, but he kept his speed steady, careful. He could feel Sophie shivering against his chest, could feel her small hands gripping the handlebars through his jacket. Behind them, the empty road stretched into nothing. Ahead, the gas station was 3 miles away. 3 miles of frozen asphalt and falling temperature, and a choice he'd already made. The choice to stop, the choice to help, the choice to be the kind of man who didn't look away. even if it cost him everything. 7 hours earlier, the morning had been quiet, the kind of quiet that fools you into thinking everything will be fine. Claire Mitchell woke at 5:30. The alarm cut through the darkness of her bedroom like a blade. She rolled out of bed, her body moving on autopilot. Single mother routine, the one she'd perfected over 6 years. She showered, dressed, made coffee she wouldn't have time to drink. Then she walked down the hall to Sophie's room. Her daughter was still asleep, curled on her side, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. Claire stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, the way mothers do when they steal these quiet seconds, before the day demands everything from them. "Sophie, sweetie, time to wake up." Sophie's eyes opened, green and bright even in the dim morning light. She smiled when she saw her mother, that smile that made everything worth it. They moved through the morning, breakfast and getting dressed, the red coat with the fuzzy hood that Sophie loved, the green backpack with her coloring book and crayons. Claire checked it twice, making sure everything was there. She buckled Sophie into the car, drove through the cold, Kalispell streets, past the diner where she worked, past the elementary school Sophie would start in the fall, to the small house on Maple Street where Grandma Rose lived. Rose was waiting at the door, 62 years old, silver hair, soft smile, the kind of grandmother every child should have. She hugged Sophie, kissed Claire on the cheek, told her not to worry, that everything would be fine. Claire believed her. Why wouldn't she? This was routine, this was normal. This was how single mothers survived, with family who stepped in, who made it possible. She drove to the diner, started her shift, poured coffee and took orders and smiled at customers, all the while thinking about the bills that needed paying, the rent that was due, the car that was making a strange noise she couldn't afford to fix. She didn't know, couldn't know that 7 miles away, everything was about to change. Rose had a problem. A medical appointment she couldn't miss. Her doctor had been firm about it. Blood work, follow-up, non-negotiable. She tried to reschedule, but there were no other openings for weeks. So she'd made a decision, called her neighbor, June Brennan, asked if she could watch Sophie for just 2 hours, maybe 3 at the most. June had agreed without hesitation. She'd known the Mitchell family for years, had watched Claire grow up, had held Sophie as a baby. Of course she would help. Rose walked Sophie across the snow-covered yard, the back way, through the gate in the fence, to June's back door. She handed over the green backpack, reminded Sophie to be good. Sophie nodded seriously, already looking past her grandmother toward the warmth inside. June welcomed her with a soft smile, a cup of hot cocoa, the kind with tiny marshmallows floating on top. She set Sophie up in the living room, coloring book, box of crayons, the television playing softly in the background, some cartoon with talking animals. Sophie sat on the floor, her legs crossed, her tongue poking out in concentration as she began to color a picture of a dinosaur. She was careful to stay inside the lines, the way her mother had taught her. June settled into her chair near the window, a cup of tea warming her hands. She watched Sophie for a while, smiling at the way the little girl tilted her head when she concentrated. Then she picked up her book, the one she'd been reading all week, and began where she'd left off. For a while, everything was peaceful, simple, safe. Then the phone rang. June set down her book, walked to the kitchen, picked up the receiver. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was her daughter-in-law, and something in her tone made June's stomach drop before she even heard the words. There had been an accident. Her grandson Owen, 8 years old, had fallen at school, the playground, a bad fall. He was on his way to the hospital. They didn't know how bad it was yet. June's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the counter, tried to breathe. Her daughter-in-law was crying, the words coming fast and scattered. A fall from the monkey bars, a head injury, blood, the ambulance. The teachers saying that they didn't know. They just didn't know. Bunty was crying too, though she didn't realize it at first. She paced the kitchen, asked questions, tried to understand, tried to figure out what she needed to do, how fast she could get to the hospital, whether Owen was going to be okay. The call lasted 10 minutes, maybe less, but in those 10 minutes, June forgot about everything else. The world narrowed to the voice on the phone, to the fear coursing through her veins, to the desperate need to get to her grandson. She forgot about Sophie entirely. In the living room, Sophie stopped coloring. She could hear Mrs. Brennan crying in the kitchen. The sound made her uncomfortable. She didn't understand what was wrong, but she knew something bad had happened. She sat very still, her crayon frozen above the page, listening to the muffled sobs. She waited for Mrs. Brennan to come back, to explain, to make it okay. But the crying continued, getting louder, more desperate. And Sophie didn't know what to do. She thought about her grandma. Rose's house wasn't far. She'd walked there with her mother many times. Through the yard, through the gate. She knew the way. She could go find Grandma Rose. Tell her that Mrs. Brennan was sad. Tell her something was wrong. Sophie stood up quietly. She put on her backpack, the green one with her coloring book inside. She zipped her red coat all the way to her chin. Then she walked to the back door. She turned the handle. It opened easily. No lock, no alarm, just a door that led to the yard. She slipped outside, into the cold, into the white world of winter. The door closed behind her with a soft click. No one saw her go. The snow was soft at first, almost fun to walk through. Her boots made little crunching sounds with each step. She followed the path she remembered, past the fence, past the big tree with the bent branch, past the mailbox with the faded numbers. But the path looked different in winter. The landmarks she remembered were buried or bare. The houses all looked the same, covered in white, the yards blending together. Everything strange and unfamiliar. After 20 minutes of walking, Sophie stopped. She looked around slowly. Nothing was familiar anymore. She didn't know where she was. She kept walking because she didn't know what else to do, because stopping felt worse than moving, because somewhere ahead, maybe, was Grandma Rose's house, was safety, was someone who would know what to do. She walked until she reached the edge of a road she didn't recognize. A big road, with no cars, no houses, just empty asphalt stretching in both directions. She stopped there, at the edge, not knowing which way to go, not understanding how she'd gotten so lost. So she waited, because that's what her mother had taught her to do when she was scared. Stay in one place. Let the grown-ups find you. Don't wander off. She waited and waited, and the cold began to seep through her coat, through her boots, into her small body. She waited because she believed someone would come. At June's house, the phone call finally ended. June wiped her eyes with a trembling hand, took a deep breath. She needed to call Rose, needed to explain, needed to get to the hospital as fast as she could. She turned around, walked toward the living room. Sophie, honey, I need to. The words died in her throat. The living room was empty. The coloring book lay open on the floor, a green crayon resting beside it. The television still played softly, but Sophie was gone. Sophie, June's voice rose, sharper now, tinged with fear. Sophie, where are you? She searched the house, the bathroom, the bedroom, the closet. Her voice grew louder, more desperate with each empty room. Emma, honey, this isn't funny. Come out right now. Then she saw it, the back door, open just a few inches, letting in a thin stream of cold air. The little red coat, the green backpack, gone. June's hand went to her mouth. A sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half sob. She ran to the door, pushed it open, looked out at the snow-covered yard, the gate and the fence, standing open. No, 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 Sophie. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, her hands shaking so hard she could barely press the numbers. When the dispatcher answered, the words tumbled out. Frantic, broken, a 6-year-old girl, missing, last seen in her living room. The back door was open. She didn't know how long Sophie had been gone. She didn't know which way she went. She didn't know. The dispatcher told her to stay calm. Help was coming. Officers were being dispatched. Search teams would be organized. But June could hear it in the woman's voice. The thing she didn't say. The thing that hung in the cold air like ice. A 6-year-old girl, alone in Montana winter. Every minute mattered. Every second counted. And Sophie had been gone for at least 30 minutes, maybe more. across town. At Rosie's diner, Claire was carrying a tray of plates when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. She was in the middle of the lunch rush. Her manager had already given her a look about personal calls, but something made her stop. Something made her pull the phone from her apron pocket. "Look at the screen." "June Brennan," Claire answered. "Hello?" The first word she heard made her blood turn to ice. "Claire, oh God! Claire, it's Sophie. She's gone." The tray slipped from Claire's hands. Plates crashed to the floor. Coffee splattered across the tiles. Customers turned and stared. Claire didn't notice any of it. She was already running for the door, her apron still tied around her waist, her keys clutched in her shaking hand, her mind unable to process, unable to accept that her daughter, her baby, was out there somewhere, alone, in the cold. She ran to her car, hands shaking so hard she could barely get the key in the ignition. She started the engine. Pulled out of the parking lot too fast, tires spinning on ice. She drove toward June's house, her phone pressed to her ear, June's voice in fragments, broken by bombs, by fear, by the weight of what had happened. Claire's mind raced. Sophie was smart. Sophie was careful. But she was 6 years old. She was small. And the Montana winter didn't care about smart or careful. It only cared about survival. And survival, for a child that small, in temperatures this cold, was measured in minutes, not hours. 30 years ago, there was another girl, another winter, another family that fell apart. Boone Kane was 14 years old, tall for his age, already broader than most boys his grade. He played football, badly, worked on cars with his father in the garage behind their house, spent his weekends riding dirt bikes in the fields outside Kalispell. He had a little sister, Bryn, 7 years old, born deaf, but you'd never know it by watching her. She moved through the world with a brightness that made everyone around her lighter, made everyone believe that disability was just a word, not a limitation. The whole family had learned sign language. His mother first, then his father, then Boone. They made it normal, made it easy. Bryn never felt different, never felt less than. She was just Bryn, their daughter, their sister, their light. October 13th, a Tuesday. Bryn was walking home from a friend's house. 4 blocks, a route she'd walked 100 times before. The sun was still up. The neighborhood was quiet, safe, the way neighborhoods are supposed to be. She never arrived. The first hour, no one worried. Kids got distracted. They stopped to look at things, to chase cats, to talk to neighbors. But when the sun started to set, when the streetlights came on, when Bryn still hadn't come home, something changed in their mother's voice. She called the friend's house. The mother said Bryn had left an hour ago. Should have been home by now. Definitely should have been home. She called neighbors. No one had seen her. She walked the route herself, calling Bryn's name, even though she knew, even though she understood. That calling wouldn't help, that Bryn couldn't hear her. The police came that night. Then the volunteers, then the people with flashlights in desperate hope. They searched every street, every alley, every yard. They checked the woods behind the school. They looked in sheds and basements and cars. Posters went up, Bryn's face staring out from telephone poles, from grocery store windows, from every corner of town. Her school picture, her bright smile, frozen in time. She was never found. No body, no leads, no answers. Just a 7-year-old girl who walked 4 blocks and vanished from the world. Boone remembered the way his father changed after that. The silence that filled their house like smoke. The bottles that appeared on the kitchen counter. The way his father stopped talking, stopped looking at anyone, just sat in his chair by the window, staring at nothing, waiting for something that would never come. His mother held on longer. She kept Bryn's room exactly as it was, washed the sheets every week, set a place for her at the table on holidays. But the light in her eyes dimmed, a little more each year, until one morning. When Boone was 26, he woke up and realized it was gone completely. Heart attack. The doctor said it was sudden, unexpected. But Boone knew the truth. Her heart had been breaking for 12 years. It just finally gave out. His father followed 18 months later. Liver failure, complications from decades of drinking. But really, he died the day Bryn disappeared. His body just took longer to stop. After the funerals, after the house was sold, after everything was divided and packed and thrown away. Boone bought a motorcycle, packed a single bag, and rode until the road ran out. He found the Lone Riders in Missoula, a club that didn't ask questions. Men who had their own scars, their own silences, their own reasons for riding. They gave him a patch, a place, a new name. Shepherd, because of the way he watched out for the younger members. The way he always seemed to know when someone was struggling. Over the years, Boone quietly joined efforts to help find missing children. He rode with search parties. He handed out flyers. He showed up at vigils and fundraisers and awareness events. He never talked about why, never wanted praise, never sought recognition. He just needed to do something, anything, to make sure no other family felt what his had felt. But it was never enough. The guilt stayed with him, like a second shadow, like a stone in his chest that he couldn't swallow. He had been home that day. He could have walked with Bryn. He could have kept her safe. He could have been the brother she needed, the protector she deserved. He hadn't. And that failure lived inside him. Permanent, unforgivable, a weight he would carry until the day he died. As he rode now, Sophie small and shivering against his chest, his mind went to Bryn, the way it always did, the way it had for 30 years. He wondered what she would look like now. She'd be 37, maybe with a family of her own, maybe happy, living a life he couldn't imagine. Or maybe she was gone, truly gone, and he would never know what happened to her, would never have answers, would never have peace. While the gas station appeared ahead, a weathered building with faded paint and a single row of pumps. Boone slowed the motorcycle, pulled into the lot, killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, complete, the world holding its breath. He looked down at Sophie. She was still shivering, even wrapped in his jacket, even protected by his body. The cold had seeped into her, the way cold does to children. Fast, merciless, dangerous. He needed to get her inside, needed to get her warm, needed to call someone, anyone, needed to make sure she got home safe. He swung his leg over the bike, lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. She was so light, so impossibly small, like she was made of air and hope and nothing else. He pushed through the glass door. A bell chimed overhead. Warm air wrapped around them. Blessed, necessary, life-saving. Behind the counter, a woman looked up, 52 years old, gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read Donna. Her eyes moved from Boone's face to the child in his arms. Her expression changed. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hand moved slowly toward the phone on the counter. Boone stopped walking. He understood. He knew what she saw. A large man, tattoos, motorcycle club vest, carrying a small girl who was clearly not his daughter. Every instinct in her body was telling her something was wrong. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice steady, calm. "I know how this looks, but I need you to listen to me for just a minute." Donna didn't pick up the phone, but her hand stayed near it. Her eyes darted between Boone and Sophie, wary, suspicious, afraid. "I found this little girl on the side of the road about 3 miles back." Boone continued. "She was alone, no car, no adult, nothing. She's freezing, she's lost. I brought her here because I need to call the police, get her back to her family." Donna didn't move, didn't speak. Her jaw was tight, her body tense. Sophie lifted her head from Boone's shoulder. She looked at the woman behind the counter with her wide green eyes. "He's helping me find my mommy," Sophie said softly, her voice small and tired. "I was lost, and he stopped. He gave me his jacket because I was cold." Something shifted in Donna's face. Her eyes moved to the leather jacket wrapped around Sophie's small frame, then to Boone's bare arms, red and rough from the cold wind. She looked at the way Sophie clung to him, not with fear, but with trust. Her hand moved away from the phone. "Hold on," she said, her voice softer now, less sharp. She disappeared through a door behind the counter, returned a moment later with a thick wool blanket. She walked around the counter, approached them slowly, wrapped the blanket around Sophie, tucking it over the leather jacket, layering warmth. "Let's get you warmed up. Sweetheart," she said to Sophie. Then she looked at Boone. "There's a phone on the wall, landline. It works." Boone nodded, carried Sophie to a table near the back of the store, set her gently in a chair. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her small hands wrapped around the fabric. Donna brought a paper cup filled with hot chocolate from the machine. Set it in front of Sophie. The little girl picked it up, held it with both hands, absorbing the heat. Boone walked to the phone on the wall, lifted the receiver, dialed 911, waited. When the dispatcher answered, he spoke clearly, calmly, gave his name, described where he'd found Sophie, explained that she was safe, warm, at Miller's gas station on Route 93. The dispatcher's voice changed, relief flooding through. "Sir, a missing child report was filed about 20 minutes ago. The mother is already on her way. We're redirecting deputies to your location now." Boone exhaled slowly. The tension in his shoulders loosened, just a fraction. "Thank you." He hung up the phone, walked back to the table. Sophie was sipping her hot chocolate, her cheeks starting to get color back, her hands still trembling slightly. Boone sat down across from her. He was aware, suddenly, of the cold that had soaked into his bones. His arms ached, his hands felt numb. But it didn't matter. Sophie was safe. That was all that mattered. The bell above the door chimed. A man in a work jacket walked in, stomping snow off his boots. He glanced at Boone, then at Sophie, then back at Boone. Then his eyes narrowed. Another customer entered, a woman with a young son. She saw Boone and instinctively pulled her child closer. Whispered something to Donna at the counter. Boone could feel it starting. The shift in the room, the way people were looking at him, the suspicion creeping in. He stood up, moved to the far corner of the store, putting as much distance between himself and Sophie as the small space allowed. He leaned against the wall, crossed his arms, kept his eyes on the floor. He waited for the sirens, for the mother, for the moment when this would be over, when Sophie would be home, when he could ride away and pretend his hands weren't still shaking. Outside, through the frost-covered window, a sheriff's cruiser turned into the parking lot, lights flashing, no siren, just the red and blue cutting through the gray afternoon. And behind it, another car, driving too fast, fishtailing slightly on the ice. A woman's face visible through the windshield, eyes wide, terrified, desperate. The mother, coming for her daughter, coming to see if the nightmare was over, or if it was just beginning. Boone stayed in the corner, hands visible, body still, waiting for whatever came next, hoping it would be enough. That what he'd done, stopping, helping, bringing Sophie here, would be seen for what it was. Not a crime, not a threat, just a man who couldn't look away, who couldn't drive past a little girl in a red coat, standing alone on a frozen road, a man who'd lost his own sister 30 years ago, and spent every day since trying to make sure no other child disappeared into nothing. The cruiser door opened, a deputy stepped out. The mother's car screeched to a stop beside it. She was already running before the engine died, already screaming her daughter's name. "Sophie!" The sound echoed across the parking lot, through the glass door, into the small gas station where a little girl sat wrapped in blankets, where a large man stood in the corner, where a story was about to be told, and retold, and told again, where truth and fear and suspicion would collide, and only one of them would survive. Claire Mitchell burst through the door like a storm breaking. The bell chimed, but the sound was lost beneath her cry. Sophie, she didn't see the other customers, didn't see the clerk behind the counter, didn't see the large man standing perfectly still in the corner. She only saw her daughter. Sophie turned at the sound of her mother's voice. Her face changed, crumpled. The brave mask she'd been holding finally breaking. "Mommy." She slid off the chair. The blanket fell away. She ran, her light-up boots flashing with each step. Claire dropped to her knees on the cold tile floor and caught her daughter in her arms. The impact nearly knocked her backwards, but she held on, pulled Sophie so close she could feel her daughter's heartbeat against her own chest, could feel her breathing, could feel her alive. warm, real. Claire couldn't speak, could only hold on, her whole body shaking, tears streaming down her face, dripping onto Sophie's red coat. She buried her face in her daughter's hair, breathed in the smell of hot chocolate and wool blanket and something deeper, something that meant safe, meant found, meant home. "Where were you?" Claire's voice broke on the words. "Baby, where were you? Are you hurt?" Sophie patted her mother's back with one small hand. "Don't cry, Mommy, I'm okay. The nice man found me." Claire pulled back just enough to look at her daughter's face, to scan for injuries, for signs of harm, for anything wrong. Sophie's cheeks were red from the cold. Her eyes were tired, but she was whole, unharmed, alive. "What nice man? What happened?" Sophie pointed across the room. "Him, the man with the motorcycle. I was lost. And he stopped. He gave me his jacket because I was cold. He brought me here." Claire's hands were still cupping Sophie's face, still checking, still not quite believing. She followed her daughter's finger, her eyes landing on the man in the corner. He was large, larger than anyone else in the room, 6'3" at least, broad shoulders, arms covered in tattoos, a leather vest with patches she couldn't read from this distance. His beard was dark with streaks of gray. His face was impossible to read, but his arms were bare, red and rough from cold, and his eyes, when they met hers, were quiet, careful, waiting. Deputy Sam Hayes pushed through the door behind Claire. 38 years old, brown uniform, radio crackling on his shoulder, his hand rested near his belt. Instinct, training, a missing child case, unknown civilian involved. "Ma'am, step back, please." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Let me assess the situation." Claire stood slowly, Sophie still in her arms. She didn't step back, didn't move away from her daughter, but she let the deputy approach. Sam's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. The clerk behind the counter, the customers standing near the shelves, the large man in the corner, the little girl clinging to her mother. "Who called this in?" Sam asked. Donna stepped forward. "He did." She pointed to Boone. "The biker. He came in carrying the girl, said he found her on Route 93. Alone. He called 911 himself, asked me for the phone." Sam turned to Boone. His body shifted, positioning himself between Boone and the mother and child. Protective, automatic. "Sir, can you step forward, please?" Slowly. Boone moved away from the wall. His hands stayed visible, at his sides, loose, non-threatening. He walked forward until Sam raised his hand. "That's far enough. What's your name?" "Boone Kane. You want to tell me what happened here?" Boone's voice was steady, low, no defensiveness, no anger, just facts. "I was riding Route 93, heading back from Kalispell. About 3 miles north, I saw a little girl standing alone on the side of the road. Red coat, green backpack. No car, no adult nearby. I stopped, asked if she was lost. She said she was trying to walk to her grandmother's house but got turned around." He paused, made sure Sam was following. "She was freezing. I had no cell signal. I brought her here. Called 911. Waited." Sam pulled out a notebook, started writing. "You get her name?" "Sophie. She didn't give a last name." Sam looked at Claire. "Ma'am, is this your daughter?" "Yes, Sophie Mitchell." Claire's voice was hoarse, raw from crying, from fear, from relief. "And this man, you know him?" Claire shook her head. "I've never seen him before in my life." Sam turned back to Boone. "You mind if I run your eye?" "Go ahead." Boone reached into his pocket. Slow, deliberate, every movement visible. He pulled out his wallet, handed his license to Sam. The deputy took it, walked back outside to his cruiser. The silence that followed was heavy. Claire held Sophie, looking between her daughter and the man who'd brought her here, trying to understand, trying to process. A man in a hunting jacket stood near the coffee machine. He'd been watching since Claire arrived. Now he spoke, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Anybody else think this is weird? Big guy on a bike just happens to find a little girl. Brings her here, real convenient." Donna turned sharp. "He called the police himself. You think someone with bad intentions does that?" The man shrugged. "I'm just saying, looks suspicious to me." A younger man, early 20s, baseball cap, standing near the snack aisle. He pulled out his phone, held it up. The camera pointed at Boone. I'm recording this. People need to know what's going on. Boone saw the red light, saw the phone, saw the moment his face became evidence, became content, became something that would spread before anyone knew the truth. He didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, hands at his sides, waiting. The man with the baseball cap was already typing, his thumbs moving fast across the screen. Caption forming, words chosen for maximum impact, maximum shares, maximum fear. Big biker at Miller's gas station with little girl. Something's not right here. Share to warn others. He hit post. The video uploaded, started spreading, moving from his phone to servers to screens. Multiplying, transforming, becoming something bigger than what it was. Outside, Sam sat in his cruiser, running Boone's name, checking for warrants, for flags, for anything that would tell him who this man really was. The computer screen lit up. Results came back. Sam's eyes scanned the information. His expression changed, softened. He picked up his radio, called it in, confirmed, then sat there for a moment, just thinking. He got out of the cruiser, walked back inside. His posture had shifted, less defensive, less wary. He handed the license back to Boone. You're clean. No warrants, no flags. He paused. Your name came up connected to some child safety organizations, search and rescue volunteer work, missing persons awareness campaigns. Boone said nothing, just took his license, put it back in his wallet. Sam extended his hand. Thank you for stopping, for bringing her here. A lot of people wouldn't have. Boone shook his hand, once, firm, then let go. Claire was watching this exchange, her arms still wrapped around Sophie, her mind racing, trying to understand who this man was, this stranger who'd saved her daughter, this person everyone else in the room had been suspecting. She walked toward him, slow steps, Sophie's hand in hers. She stopped a few feet away, studied his face, the rough features, the scars, the gray in his beard, the leather vest with patches that read Lone Riders MC, Montana chapter, and his eyes, dark, quiet, carrying something she couldn't name, something old, something heavy. Thank you. The words came out broken, barely more than a whisper. Thank you for stopping, for helping her, for... Her voice broke. She couldn't finish. Boone's voice was low, gentle. I'm glad she's safe. Claire's face crumpled. Fresh tears came. Not fear this time, not panic. Something else, something deeper. Relief so profound it hurt. Gratitude that reached down to her bones. She reached out, took Boone's hand, held it between both of hers. You saved my daughter's life. Boone looked down at their joined hands, at this mother thanking him for something he couldn't not do, something that wasn't heroic, just necessary, just human. She's a brave kid, he said quietly. She did everything right. Sophie tugged on her mother's arm. Claire looked down. Sophie was signing something, her small hands moving in patterns Claire didn't understand. She wants you to know, Sophie said, that you're a good man and that she wasn't scared because you were nice. Boone's throat went tight. He looked at Sophie, at her green eyes, at the trust still there, despite everything, despite the cold, despite being lost, despite the strange man on the motorcycle. She'd known, somehow, instinctively, that he was safe, that she could trust him. Thank you, Sophie, he signed back, his hands moving in the language he'd learned 30 years ago, for a sister who couldn't hear. You're very brave. Sophie's eyes went wide. You know sign language. My sister was deaf a long time ago. I learned for her. Sophie smiled, then signed something else. Boone read it, signed back. They had a brief conversation, just a few exchanges, the room watching, not understanding the words, but understanding something else. Connection, trust, something real. Claire, watch this. Watch this large, intimidating man speaking gently with her daughter in a language of hands. Watch Sophie smile, really smile, for the first time since this nightmare began. The man in the hunting jacket shifted, uncomfortable. He'd been so certain something was wrong. so sure his suspicions were justified. Now he wasn't sure what to think. The younger man with the baseball cap stared at his phone. His video had already gotten 20 shares, 40, 60, comments piling up beneath it, people asking questions, making assumptions, jumping to conclusions. He looked up at Boone, at the deputy shaking his hand, at the mother holding his hand, at the little girl signing with him. His face went pale. He'd made a mistake, posted something without knowing, without waiting, without understanding. He tapped his screen, found the post, hit delete, but it was too late. The video was already out there, already downloaded, already reposted by people who'd never know he'd changed his mind, already spreading, with captions that got worse with each share. Suspicious man with child. Possible abduction. Be careful out there. The wrong story, moving faster than the truth ever could. Sam took statements from everyone. Donna told her version, the customers told theirs. Claire explained about June Brennan, about the phone call, about Sophie walking out, about the terror of the last hour. Boone gave his statement. Clear, factual, no embellishment, just what happened. Where, when, why. Sam wrote it all down. Mr. Kane, you're free to go. We'll need you available for follow-up, but there's no issue here. You did the right thing. Boone nodded. He looked at Claire one more time. Take care of her. I will. Claire's voice was steady now, stronger. Thank you for everything. Boone walked to the door, pushed it open. The cold hit him immediately. He'd forgotten his jacket. It was still wrapped around Sophie, still keeping her warm. He walked to his motorcycle, swung his leg over, started the engine. The rumble filled the parking lot, drew eyes, as it always did. He pulled out onto Route 93, headed south toward Missoula, toward the clubhouse, toward whatever came next. Behind him, Miller's gas station disappeared in his mirrors. The mother and daughter safe inside, the deputy taking notes, the story being recorded, being documented, being locked into official record. The truth, at least for now, at least in that room. But outside that room, in the digital world where stories spread at light speed, a different narrative was taking shape, growing, multiplying, becoming something he couldn't control. His face, his vest, his size, his appearance, all the things that made people step back, made mothers pull their children closer, made strangers suspicious. All of it becoming evidence, becoming proof, becoming guilt without trial. By the time Boone reached the clubhouse, his phone had 23 missed calls, texts flooding in, brothers asking if he was okay, if he needed backup, if the rumors were true. He didn't know what rumors, didn't understand, until he opened his messages and saw the screenshots, the video. His face captured mid-frame, Sophie in his arms, the caption beneath it, the comments piling up. Monster. Predator. Someone needs to stop this man. Boone stared at his phone, at the words, at the certainty in them, at how quickly strangers had decided who he was, what he'd done, what he deserved. He put the phone down, walked inside. The clubhouse was empty. Most brothers were still at work. Wouldn't be here until evening. He had the place to himself. He sat in the common room, the leather couch creaking under his weight. He stared at the wall, at the photos hanging there, brothers at charity rides, at fundraisers, at search parties. Years of trying to do good, trying to matter, trying to make up for what he couldn't fix. And now, this, suspicion, accusation, judgment, for stopping, for helping, for doing what anyone should do when they see a child in danger. The door opened, footsteps, heavy, familiar. Flint Cross walked in, 45 years old, vice president of the Lone Riders, shaved head, salt and pepper beard, arms covered in ink. He was carrying a six-pack. Heard you had an interesting afternoon, Flint said. No preamble, no small talk, just straight to it. You could say that. Flint set the beer on the table, pulled 2 bottles free, handed one to Boone, sat down across from him. Want to talk about it? Boone took a long drink, then told the story. The red coat on the empty road, Sophie standing alone, the gas station, the deputy, the mother, the video, the comments. Flint listened without interrupting. When Boone finished, Flint was quiet for a long moment, just thinking, processing. "You did the right thing," Flint said finally. "You know that, right? Doesn't matter what I know. Matters what they think. They don't know you. They're making assumptions based on what you look like, not who you are." Boone stared at his beer. She looked just like Bryn, standing there, alone. "I couldn't." His voice broke. "I couldn't keep riding. Couldn't pretend I didn't see her." Flint leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Boone, look at me." Boone looked up. "You saved that little girl's life. You brought her home. You did what your sister needed someone to do for her. What you couldn't do then, you did today. Bryn's still gone. Yeah, she is. And that's not your fault. Never was. You were 14 years old. You couldn't have known. Couldn't have stopped it. I could have walked with her. Maybe, or maybe whoever took her would have just waited, taken you both, or killed you trying to protect her. You don't know, can't know, but punishing yourself for 30 years. That's not justice. That's just..." Flint stopped, shook his head. "That's just destroying yourself for something you couldn't control." Boone said nothing. The words hung in the air between them. True, probably true. But 30 years of guilt doesn't disappear because someone tells you it should. "What about the video?" Boone said. "The comments. People think. People think a lot of things, most of them wrong. This'll blow over. Truth will come out. Always does. Sometimes the lie spreads farther than the truth. Then we make sure the truth gets louder." Boone looked at his brother, at the certainty in his face, the loyalty, the fierce protection the club offered. The thing that had kept Boone alive, kept him moving, kept him from drowning completely. "Thanks for coming," Boone said quietly. "That's what brothers do." They sat in silence, drinking beer, watching the afternoon fade into evening through the windows, neither of them knowing, couldn't know, that across town, something else was happening, something that would change everything. Claire Mitchell sat in her car, Sophie asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day, from the fear, from everything. Claire had driven them home, carried Sophie inside, put her in her own bed, covered her with blankets, sat watching her sleep until she was certain, absolutely certain, that her daughter was safe. Then she'd walk back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and let herself fall apart. Really fall apart. The crying that she'd been holding back, the terror that she'd been pushing down, all of it flooding out at once. She cried until there was nothing left, until her throat was raw, until her eyes burned. Then she sat in the silence, in the aftermath, and tried to understand what had happened. A stranger had saved her daughter, a man she'd never met, would probably never have spoken to if they'd passed on the street, would have avoided, would have pulled Sophie away from, because of how he looked, what he represented. And he'd been the one who stopped, who helped, who brought Sophie home. She pulled out her phone, started scrolling, looking for. She wasn't sure what. Information, maybe? Understanding. She typed his name into the search bar. Boone Kane, Lone Riders MC. The results came up. The video was first, the one with the wrong caption. The accusatory comments. Claire felt her stomach turn. This wasn't right. This wasn't what happened. She scrolled past it, found other things, photos from charity events, bikers with children at hospitals, fundraisers for missing kids, search parties, awareness campaigns, years of quiet work, no headlines, no recognition, just men showing up, doing the work, making a difference. She kept scrolling, found something else. An old newspaper article, archived, scanned, the ink faded but still readable. Local girl missing, Bryn Kane, 7 years old, disappeared Tuesday afternoon. Family asked for help. The photo showed a little girl, dark hair, bright smile, wearing a purple dress. The article was dated 30 years ago. Claire read it, then read it again, then searched for follow-up articles. There were dozens. Updates on the search, pleas from the family, vigils, fundraisers, and then years later. Years. A death notice for Mrs. Elizabeth Kane, survived by her son, Boone Kane. No mention of Bryn, no closure, no answers. Claire's eyes filled with tears again. Different tears. She understood now. Understood why Boone had stopped, why he couldn't drive past Sophie, why he'd wrapped her in his jacket, risked everything, did whatever it took to bring her home, because his own sister never came home, because someone didn't stop, someone didn't help, someone looked away, and he'd spent 30 years making sure he would never be that person, would never be the one who drove past, who ignored, who let another child disappear. Claire looked at the video again, at the comments, at the wrong story spreading, at this man being accused, being judged, being destroyed. For doing what everyone should do, she couldn't let that stand, wouldn't. She opened her camera, turned it to face her, pressed record. She didn't rehearse, didn't plan, just spoke. From the heart, from the truth. My name is Claire Mitchell. Today, a man named Boone Kane saved my daughter's life. She told the story, all of it. Sophie wandering off, getting lost, the cold, the empty road, the stranger who stopped, who wrapped her in his jacket, who brought her to safety, who called the police himself, who waited, who did everything right. There's a video going around accusing this man, calling him suspicious, telling people to be afraid. But I'm here to tell you, my daughter is alive because of him. He didn't have to stop. Most people wouldn't have, but he did, and Sophie is home, safe, because this man, this stranger, chose to help. Her voice broke. She steadied herself, kept going. I don't care what he looks like. I don't care about his vest or his bike or his size. I care that he saved my baby, and I will not let anyone say otherwise. She ended the video, stared at it, then hit post, shared it publicly. No privacy settings, no restrictions. Let the world see. Let the truth fight back. Within an hour, the video had been shared 100 times. Within 2 hours, 1,000 comments flooded in. Different comments, grateful, supportive, apologetic. Thank you for telling the truth. This man is a hero. I shared the first video. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The tide was starting to turn, slowly, carefully, the truth catching up to the lie, gaining ground, fighting back. But it wasn't fast enough. Wouldn't be fast enough. Because the internet never forgets, never fully corrects. The first version would always be out there, always accessible, always ready to resurface. At the clubhouse, Boone's phone buzzed. Once, twice, then didn't stop. Messages flooding in, brothers sending links, sending Claire's video, sending the new comments, the changed narrative. Flint looked at his own phone, watched the video, looked at Boone. You see this? Boone shook his head. Flint handed him the phone. Boone watched, listened to Claire's voice, her defense, her gratitude, her refusal to let him be destroyed. When it ended, Boone sat there, holding the phone, not knowing what to feel. Relief maybe, or just exhaustion, the kind that comes when you have been carrying something too heavy for too long. She didn't have to do that, Boone said quietly. No, she didn't. But she did, because that's what good people do. They tell the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs them. Boone handed the phone back, stared at the wall, at the photos, at 30 years of trying to matter, trying to make a difference, trying to save someone, anyone, since he couldn't save Bryn. Outside, the Montana winter pressed down, cold and relentless, the kind that kills if you're not careful, the kind that doesn't care about good intentions or second chances or men who stop on empty roads. But inside, in this room, two brothers sat in silence, drinking beer, waiting for tomorrow, for whatever came next. For the moment when the story would settle, when the truth would finally win, when Boone Kane could ride away. Not as a suspect, not as a predator, but as what he'd always been. A man who stopped, who helped, who refused to look away. Even when looking away would have been easier, safer, less costly, a man who carried his sister's memory like a stone and used that weight, that pain, that guilt to make sure no other child would be standing alone, waiting, hoping, believing that someone, anyone, would come. He'd come. Today, for Sophie, the way someone should have come for Bryn. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Not redemption, not forgiveness, not peace, but enough for today, for this moment. For one little girl in a red coat who went home safe because a stranger stopped. Because sometimes, in this cold world, in this hard place, someone does the right thing, not for recognition, not for praise, just because it's right, because it's necessary. Because looking away would be worse than any accusation, any judgment, any cost. That was Boone Kane. That had always been Boone Kane. And nothing, not the video, not the comments, not 30 years of guilt, could change that. The truth was simple, clear, undeniable. He saved her. He brought her home. He did what heroes do, even when heroes look like monsters to people who don't know better. The evening deepened, the clubhouse filled, brothers arriving, hearing the story, offering support, offering protection, offering the thing the club had always offered. Family, brotherhood, the knowledge that you're not alone, never alone, not as long as you wear the patch. Boone accepted it, grateful, tired, still thinking about Sophie, about her green eyes, about the way she'd trusted him, about how she'd known, somehow, that he was safe. Children know, sometimes. They see past the surface, past the fear, past what society teaches them. They see truth, they see intention, they see heart. Sophie had seen his and trusted it. And that trust, that faith, that innocent belief that this stranger would help her, that might be the thing that finally, after 30 years, let Boone believe it too, that he was worth saving, worth trusting, worth something more than guilt and grief and endless penance for a sin that was never his to carry. Maybe, just maybe, he could start to believe. The story moved faster than truth usually moves. Claire's video spread through the night like wildfire, from her phone to servers to screens, multiplying with each share, each comment, each person who watched and understood what had really happened. By morning, the narrative had shifted. The first video, the one with the accusations, was still out there, still accessible, but buried now beneath the truth, beneath Claire's defense, beneath hundreds of people sharing their own stories about Boone Kane, about the Lone Riders MC, about the quiet work they'd done for years. Local news caught it by sunrise. A reporter from KPX in Missoula called the sheriff's office, asked for confirmation. Deputy Sam Hayes gave a statement, clear, unambiguous. Boone Kane was not a suspect, had never been a suspect, was the reason Sophie Mitchell was alive. The correction aired on the morning news, then the noon broadcast, then again at 6, each time with more context, more background, more truth pushing back against the lie that had gotten a head start. But Boone didn't watch any of it. He woke at dawn in his apartment above the motorcycle shop, made coffee he wouldn't finish, sat at his small kitchen table and stared at nothing. His phone was silent now. The flood of messages had stopped. Brothers had checked in, confirmed he was okay, then left him alone. The way you do when someone needs space to process, to think, to feel whatever they're feeling without an audience. He was thinking about Sophie, about the way she'd looked at him, trusted him, signed with him, about how she'd known, somehow, that he was safe. He was thinking about Bryn, the way he always did, but differently now, less like drowning, more like remembering, just remembering, without the crushing weight that usually came with it. Someone had stopped for Sophie. Someone had brought her home. Someone had been there the way no one had been there for Bryn. And that someone, for better or worse, for all the complexity and cost, had been him. Maybe that mattered. Maybe that was enough. His phone buzzed, a single text, from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't open it, almost deleted it. But something made him look. It was from Claire. Can we meet? I want Sophie to see you again. I want to say thank you properly. Rosie's Diner, tomorrow at 2, if you're willing. Boone stared at the message. Read it twice, 3 times. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Not sure what to say, not sure if he should say anything. He'd done his part, brought Sophie home. The story was over. He could ride away, go back to his life. Let this become just another moment, another road, another memory filed away with all the others. But he thought about Sophie's face, her smile when he'd signed with her, the way she'd called him a good man in the language of hands. And he found himself typing. Okay, 2 o'clock. He hit send before he could change his mind. The next afternoon, Boone pulled his motorcycle into the parking lot of Rosie's Diner. The building was old, faded red siding, a neon sign that flickered even in daylight, the kind of place that served coffee in ceramic mugs and had the same menu it had 20 years ago. He sat on the bike for a moment, engine idling, his hands on the handlebars, looking at the door, at the windows, at the people inside living their normal lives, not knowing, not caring, that he was out here trying to decide if he was brave enough to walk in. This wasn't about danger. He'd faced down real danger more times than he could count. This was harder. This was being seen, not as the biker, not as the suspect, not as the stranger in the video, but as a person, as Boone, as someone who'd done something good and didn't know how to accept gratitude for it. He killed the engine, swung his leg over, walked toward the door. The bell chimed as he stepped inside. Warm air, the smell of coffee and bacon and home cooking. Conversations murmuring from booths along the windows. He spotted Claire near the back, sitting in a booth with sunlight falling across the table. Sophie was beside her, bent over a paper placemat, a crayon gripped in her small hand, drawing something. Sophie looked up. Her eyes found his face, and her whole expression changed. A smile spread across her features. Bright, genuine, unguarded. She waved, her hand moving in quick, eager motions. Boone felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for as long as he could remember. He walked toward them, slow, steady, aware of the eyes following him, the recognition in some faces, the calculation, the reassessment happening in real time. He slid into the booth across from Claire and Sophie. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, waiting, charged with something neither of them quite knew how to name. Then Claire reached across the table, slid a piece of paper toward him, folded once, the edges slightly crinkled. Boone opened it carefully. It was a drawing. Crayon lines filled the page. Bright, uneven. A motorcycle, large and dark. A man standing next to it, wearing what looked like wings made of leather. And beside him, a little girl in a red coat, her hand reaching up, holding his, above the figures, in wobbly letters that leaned in different directions. 2 words. Thank you. Boone stared at the drawing. His throat felt tight. His eyes burned. He couldn't speak. Sophie wanted you to have it, Claire said softly. She worked on it all morning, she said. She said you were like an angel, because you came when she needed help. And angels don't always look the way people think they should. Boone looked at Sophie. She was watching him with hopeful eyes, waiting to see if he liked it, if it was okay. It's perfect. His voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. I'll keep it somewhere safe, I promise. Sophie smiled, satisfied, then went back to coloring another picture. This one had 3 figures, a woman, a little girl, and a large man with a beard, all holding hands. Claire's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. She took a breath, started speaking, the words coming slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told him what the last 2 days had been like. The terror, the relief, the guilt, the endless replaying of every choice she'd made, every moment she'd been working instead of with Sophie, every time she'd trusted someone else to watch her daughter. I always felt like I was doing this alone, she said, her voice dropping. Like no one would be there if something went wrong. Like I was one mistake away from losing everything. She paused, looked at him, really looked. But you were there, a stranger on an empty road, and you stopped. You didn't have to. Most people wouldn't have, but you did. Boone listened, didn't interrupt. Let her speak until she was finished. When the silence returned, he looked down at the drawing still resting on the table, at Sophie's crayon version of him, with wings. I had a sister. The words came slowly, each one carrying weight. Her name was Bryn. She disappeared when I was 14, walking home from a friend's house, 4 blocks. She never made it. Claire's expression shifted, understanding flooding in. Oh God, Boone, I'm so sorry. They never found her. He continued, his voice steady but quiet. My parents, they fell apart. My father drank himself to death. My mother's heart just stopped. Years of grief. It killed her. He paused, looked at Sophie, at the way she was carefully coloring inside the lines, at her concentration, her innocence, her trust that the world would keep her safe. When I saw Sophie standing on that road, alone in the snow, I saw Bryn. I saw the moment someone should have stopped, should have been there, should have brought her home. His jaw clenched. I couldn't drive past her. Couldn't live with myself if I had. Claire reached across the table, placed her hand over his. She didn't say anything. Didn't try to fill the silence with words that wouldn't help, wouldn't change anything. Just held his hand, let him know he wasn't alone. That she understood, that what he'd done mattered, around them. The diner continued its quiet rhythm. Forks clinked against plates, conversations murmured. A few customers glanced toward their booth. Some recognized Boone, recognized his face from the videos, from the news, from the story that had spread like wildfire. But the whispers that passed between them now were different, carried something new. Understanding, respect, gratitude, the kind that comes when people realize they were wrong, when the truth catches up and forces them to see. A waitress approached, older woman, gray hair, kind eyes. She set down 3 plates without being asked. Pie, apple, still warm. On the house, she said quietly, then walked away before Boone could protest. Sophie looked at the pie, then at Boone. She signed something, quick, excited. She says, Claire translated, she says you should come to her birthday. It's in March. She wants you to meet her grandma, and she wants to show you her room and her stuffed elephant. Boone looked at Sophie, at the invitation in her eyes, at the simple, uncomplicated desire to have him in her life. Not as a hero, not as a stranger, just as someone who mattered, someone who belonged. I'd like that, he signed back, speaking and signing at the same time. I'd like that very much. 3 weeks later, Boone's phone rang, unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Had gotten too many strange calls since the incident. Reporters, curious strangers, people wanting interviews, wanting stories, wanting pieces of something that wasn't theirs to take. But something made him answer. Hello? Mr. Kane, this is Margaret Morrison. I'm the assistant principal at Flathead Valley Elementary. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Boone's first instinct was suspicion. Schools didn't usually call bikers, not for good reasons. What's this about? We're planning a child safety awareness event for the spring, teaching kids what to do if they get lost, how to identify safe adults, how to ask for help, and, well, we'd like you and your club to participate. Boone was silent, processing, not sure he'd heard right. Margaret continued, what you did for Sophie Mitchell, it's exactly the kind of thing we want to teach. That heroes don't always look the way we expect. That sometimes the safest person is the one everyone else is afraid of. We want you to speak, share your story, help kids understand. I'm not good at that, Boone said. Speaking, crowds, I don't. You spoke to Sophie just fine. You spoke to her mother. This isn't different. It is different. That was. He stopped, tried to find words. That was just helping. I don't know what this is. This is legacy. Margaret's voice was gentle, firm. This is what you leave behind, what you teach, what you show the next generation about courage and kindness in doing what's right even when it's hard. Boone sat with that. Legacy. He'd never thought about legacy, had never imagined he'd live long enough to leave one, had spent so many years just existing, surviving, carrying guilt. trying to make up for something that couldn't be fixed. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course, take your time. But Mr. Kane, I hope you'll say yes, I think. I think you could change a lot of young lives, just by showing up." That night, Boone sat with Flint at the clubhouse, a half-empty bottle of whiskey between them. The common room dark except for the light over the pool table. "School wants me to speak," Boone said, "at some safety event. Talk to kids about, I don't even know, about stopping, about helping." "You gonna do it?" "I don't know, not good at that kind of thing. Standing up, being watched, everyone." He trailed off. Flint leaned back in his chair. "Brother, this isn't about being good at talking. This is about showing up, being present, letting those kids see that someone like you, someone they might cross the street to avoid, can be trusted, can be safe, can be the one who saves them. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up, but you still showed up. That's what matters." Boone poured another drink, stared at it. "Never thought I'd be doing something like this. Talking to kids, being, I don't know, being someone people look up to. You've been that person for 30 years. You just never let yourself believe it." Boone looked at his brother, at the certainty in his face, at the loyalty that had kept Boone alive through the worst years. "All right, I'll do it." "Good. And brother, we'll be there. All of us. You won't be alone." Spring came to Montana the way it always did, slowly, reluctantly, the snow melting in patches, the sky losing its heavy gray, the air warming just enough to believe that summer might actually come. The day of the event was clear, cold but not frozen, the kind of day that felt like possibility, like change, like something new beginning. Boone rode to Flathead Valley Elementary with 6 brothers behind him, their engines rumbling in formation, drawing eyes from every direction. Parents looked up from their phones. Children pressed their round faces against classroom windows. The parking lot fell silent as they pulled in. 7 motorcycles, 7 men in leather vests, patches and tattoos and beards, everything society had taught people to fear, riding straight toward an elementary school. Boone parked his bike, killed the engine, sat there for a moment, his hands still on the handlebars, his heart pounding against his ribs. This was harder than he'd expected. Scarier than any fight, any road, any moment of physical danger. This was vulnerability. This was being seen. This was standing in front of 200 children and their parents and admitting. Admitting what? That he wasn't a monster, that he could be trusted, that appearances lied. Flint pulled up beside him, killed his engine, looked at Boone. "Ready?" "No." "Good, let's go anyway." They walked toward the school, boots echoing on pavement. The gym doors opened. Margaret Morrison stood there, 40 years old, warm smile, professional clothes. She extended her hand. "Mr. Kane, thank you for coming. Thank you all." Inside. The gymnasium was full. 200 children sat on bleachers, kindergarten through 5th grade. Their parents stood along the walls. Some looked curious, some looked skeptical. Some looked like they'd already made up their minds and were just waiting to be proven right. Boone walked to the front of the room. His brother stayed near the door, present, supportive, but letting him do this alone. This was his moment, his story, his chance. He stood there, facing the crowd, every eye on him, every judgment, every assumption, every fear, all of it pressing down like weight. He saw Sophie in the front row, sitting beside Claire, wearing her red coat even though it was warm in here. She smiled, gave him thumbs up, and that simple gesture, that uncomplicated trust, made it possible to speak. "My name is Boone Kane." His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. Tried again. "I'm with the Lone Riders Motorcycle Club, and I'm here to talk to you about being lost, about being scared, and about asking for help." He paused, let that settle. "A few weeks ago, I found a little girl standing alone on a frozen road. She was lost. She was cold. She didn't know where her family was, and when I stopped to help her, she did something brave, something smart, something that probably saved her life. She trusted me." He looked at Sophie, at the way she was listening, understanding. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I'm a big guy. I look scary. I have tattoos and a beard, and I ride a motorcycle. Your parents probably taught you to stay away from people like me. And you know what? That's okay. Being careful is smart. Being cautious keeps you safe. But here's the thing. Heroes don't always look the way you expect. Sometimes. The person who can help you, the person who will keep you safe, doesn't look like a superhero, doesn't wear a cape, doesn't match the picture in your head. His voice steadied, grew stronger. Sometimes, that person looks like me, or like a police officer, or like a grandma in a store, or like a teenager walking their dog. Safe adults come in all shapes, all sizes, and all appearances, and the thing that could save your life, is knowing how to tell the difference. He talked for 15 minutes about safety, about trust, about the difference between stranger danger and stranger safety, about how being lost wasn't shameful, wasn't failure, was just something that happened, and knowing how to ask for help, how to find safe adults, how to stay calm. That was what mattered. He told them about Sophie, about how she'd done everything right, stayed in one place, didn't wander further, trusted her instincts, asked for help from someone who stopped. The world is full of people who will help you, he said, full of people who will stop, who will bring you home, who will keep you safe, but you have to let them. You have to be willing to ask, to trust, to believe that good people still exist. When he finished, the room was quiet, not uncomfortable, just absorbing, processing, understanding something they hadn't known before. Then applause, starting small, growing, filling the gymnasium, parents clapping, children clapping, some standing, the sound washing over Boone like a wave, like forgiveness, like acceptance. He looked at his brothers, at Flint nodding, at the pride in their faces, at the validation of years of work, years of trying, years of showing up after. Parents approached, shook his hand, thanked him, shared their own stories, their own experiences, their own gratitude. A woman with 2 young daughters. My husband is in the MC in Billings. He does this kind of work too. Thank you for representing us well. A man with a veteran's cap. He signed his words, slowly, rusty, but real. My grandson is deaf. Thank you for showing him that someone will always be able to speak his language. An elderly woman, elderly, tears in her eyes. My daughter disappeared 30 years ago. She was 7. They never found her. What you did, what you do, it matters more than you know. Boone's throat went tight. He could only nod, could only accept their words, their gratitude, their grief shared with a stranger who understood. Sophie and Claire waited until everyone else had left. Then Sophie ran to him. He crouched down. She threw her arms around his neck, hugged him tight. When she pulled back, she signed, "You were so brave. I was proud." "Thank you, Sophie. You were brave first. You taught me." Claire's eyes were wet. That was incredible. Those kids, they'll remember this. Remember you. Remember that they can trust people who look different, that they don't have to be afraid. Hope so. Boone stood. Hope it matters. It does. It already does. 1 year passed. The seasons turned. Winter to spring to summer to fall to winter again. The world kept spinning. Life kept moving. And Boone Kane kept riding. But something had changed, something fundamental, in how people looked at him, in how he looked at himself, in the space between what he'd been and what he was becoming. He visited Sophie and Claire regularly, monthly at first, then more often, birthdays, holidays, random Saturdays when he was in town. He'd become, not family exactly, but something close, something real. Uncle Boone, the motorcycle man, the one who stopped. He spoke at 3 more schools, then a community center, then a statewide conference on child safety, each time easier, more natural. The words coming without the crushing weight of self-doubt, of guilt, of the certainty that he didn't deserve to be heard. The Lone Riders expanded their outreach. More charity rides, more fundraisers, more quiet work that didn't seek headlines but changed lives anyway. Boone at the center, leading, teaching, showing younger members that this was what the patch meant: protection, service, being present when others ran. Sophie turned 7, started first grade, made friends, thrived. The trauma of that winter day faded, not gone, never gone, but softened, integrated. Part of her story, but not the whole story. She still talked about Boone, still drew pictures of motorcycles, still told her friends about the day she got lost and an angel on a motorcycle brought her home. Claire started working at a nonprofit, families in crisis, single parents, people who needed help navigating systems designed to fail them. She spoke publicly about that day, about what it meant, about how one person stopping changed everything. And Bryn. Boone still thought about Bryn. Every day, would always think about her, but differently now, less like drowning, more like remembering, honoring, carrying her memory forward, not as weight, but as purpose. On the anniversary, 1 year to the day, Claire posted a photo, Sophie and Boone at a community fair, Sophie holding his hand, looking up at him, smiling, trusting, safe. Boone looking down at her, his expression caught in a moment of peace, something soft in his face, something light, something that looked like a man who'd finally, after 30 years, forgiven himself. The caption read, 1 year ago, a stranger chose to stop. Today, he's family. The post spread faster than the original video, farther than the accusations, carried by people who understood, who'd been helped, who'd been saved, who knew that the world needed more people like Boone Kane, more people who stopped, who helped, who refused to look away. Boone saw the post late that night, alone in his apartment, the television off, the only light coming from his phone screen. He looked at the photo for a long time, at Sophie's smile, at his own face, at the moment captured, preserved, made real. He typed a message to Claire, 2 words, "Thank you." Her reply came minutes later, "No, thank you, for everything." Boone put down the phone, walked to his window, looked out at the night sky. The stars were bright, clear, the kind of night that felt infinite, possible, open, somewhere. He thought. Bryn was watching, and maybe, just maybe, she was proud, proud of who he'd become, what he'd done, how he'd turned grief into purpose, pain into action, guilt into service. He stood there for a long time, letting the silence fill the room, thinking about roads traveled, miles behind him, miles still ahead. He thought about the boy he'd been at 14, standing in his family's living room, waiting for a sister who would never come home. He thought about the man he'd become, the scars, the silence, the stubborn choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that it mattered. He'd spent so long running from the pain, but he wasn't running anymore. The next morning, Boone woke before dawn, dressed in his usual clothes, pulled on his boots, walked outside to his motorcycle. The air was cold but not bitter. Winter losing its grip, spring coming, he climbed onto the bike, started the engine. The familiar rumble settled into his bones, into his chest, into the place where the stone used to sit, where guilt used to live, where Bryn's absence used to echo. It was still there, would always be there, but lighter now, softer, made bearable by purpose, by knowing that he'd stopped, that he'd helped, that Sophie was alive because he'd made a choice, the right choice, the only choice. He pulled out of the lot, turned onto the open road. The sun rose ahead of him, painting the sky in golden pink. The road stretched out, empty, beautiful, full of possibility. He wasn't riding away from something anymore, wasn't fleeing, wasn't trying to outrun grief or guilt or the ghost of a 7-year-old girl who disappeared 30 years ago. He was riding towards something, purpose, peace, the quiet knowledge that one choice on one frozen afternoon had changed everything, had saved a life, had redeemed a life, had proven that the past doesn't have to define the future, that guilt can transform into grace, that broken people can still do beautiful things. The motorcycle hummed beneath him, The wind pressed against his jacket. Montana stretched out in all directions. Big sky country, where the land met the horizon and possibilities felt endless. Boone Kane, the man they called Shepherd, the biker who'd stopped, the stranger who'd saved, the brother who'd never forgotten, rode into the morning light, not running, not hiding, not carrying weight that would crush him, just riding, just being, just moving forward, 1 mile at a time, one choice at a time, one child at a time. Because that's what heroes do, not the kind in movies, not the kind in stories, but the real kind, the kind that looks like anyone, like everyone, like the person you'd cross the street to avoid, the kind that stops when others drive past, that helps when others look away, that chooses courage over comfort, service over safety, connection over fear. The road curved ahead. Boone leaned into it, smooth, confident, at peace somewhere behind him. In a small house in Kalispell, a 7-year-old girl was waking up, putting on her shoes, getting ready for school, living the life she almost lost, the life a stranger had given back. Somewhere beside him, invisible but present, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and silent voice rode too. Not haunting, not accusing, just there. Part of him, part of his story, part of what made him who he was. Both girls, lost and found, gone and saved, past and present, woven together, making something new, something whole, something that looked like redemption, like purpose, like a man finally understanding that he'd always been enough, that stopping was enough, helping was enough, showing up was enough, that he, Boone Kane, biker, brother, shepherd, was enough. The sun climbed higher, the road went on. And Boone rode, into morning, into future, into a life that finally, after 30 years of darkness, felt like light. Some stories end with answers, others end with beginnings. This one ended with both. A stranger stopped on a frozen road. A little girl went home safe. A man found something he'd been searching for his entire life. And somewhere, in living rooms and kitchens, on phones and laptops, people are still watching, still listening, still believing that the world is full of those who will stop, who will help, who will protect. Not because they have to, not because they'll be rewarded, but because it's right, because it's necessary, because looking away would be worse than any cost, any judgment, any price. That was the lesson. Simple, clear, eternal. Heroes exist. They always have. They just don't always look the way we expect. Sometimes they look like monsters. Sometimes they wear leather and ride motorcycles and carry scars we can't see. But when you're lost, when you're cold, when you're standing alone on an empty road, those are the hands that reach out. Those are the voices that say you're safe. Those are the hearts that refuse to let you disappear. Boone Kane knew that now, believed it, finally, after 30 years, and he rode on, into the light, into the life he'd earned, into the peace he'd finally found. The redcoat was the first thing he saw. That would always be true. That moment would always matter, would always be the dividing line. Before and after, lost and found, guilt and grace. But now, when he thought of that moment, he didn't just see the coat, didn't just see the little girl, didn't just see failure and fear and the ghost of his sister. He saw choice. He saw courage. He saw a man who stopped, who helped, who refused to be the person who drove past. He saw himself, clearly, for the first time in 30 years. And what he saw, finally, was worth saving. The road went on. The sun climbed. The world turned. And Boone Kane, the man who stopped, the man who saved, the man who showed that heroes don't need capes, just courage, just compassion, just the willingness to do what's right when it costs you everything. Rode into tomorrow, into hope, into light, always forward, always riding, always ready to stop. If another child needs him, if another red coat appears on another frozen road, if another moment comes when someone has to choose between comfort and courage, between safety and service, between looking away and looking back, he'll stop, always, every time, forever. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. That's who Bryn would want him to be. And finally, after 30 years, that's who he lets himself believe he is. Enough. Worthy, redeemed, home.